Discover the power within. Unity Online Radio. The voice of an awakening world.
Are you ready to create a life that's intentional and dynamic? Welcome to The Intentional Spirit with your host, Reverend Temple Hayes.
And welcome, everyone, and thank you so much. I always like to acknowledge up front and close the value of being an intentional spirit. An intentional spirit is a person that is beyond someone that has good intentions. Regardless of the externals, regardless of the changes in your life, you still stay with that laser focus to have the awareness of the change that you're walking towards. It's a very powerful reality. I'm thrilled today that we have a repeat couple here in our show because they just continue to write more books and share who they are as intentional spirits. Charlie and Linda Bloom. They're at bloomwork.com. Their new book is That Which Doesn't Kill Us. Linda and Charlie, welcome to the show today. I'm so delighted that you're with us.
I'm happy to be here with you.
Me too. Great to be here.
What a pleasure. Well, the last time you were on the show, we talked about your tremendous life and all the things that you do to share in this world through books and lectures and events, the value of staying the course in relationship. How many years are we looking at now?
We're together 50 years.
Girl, oh my gosh. Woo-hoo, congratulations. You must have got together when you were just kids because you look great.
It's amazing, 50 years because we're only 38 years old.
I know, that's numbers. They're just not working out anymore, are they?
Never good at math.
Oh my gosh, this is it's just so great. You are such tremendous models, and I would urge anyone listening to go to their website because they do so much with relationship, and there's such value in staying the course and learning how to language with each other and those kind of things. But I want us to focus a bit on your new book. I always like to know the story behind the story. So how were you led to focus on this particular book?
Well, we wrote this book, the very first one that we ever wrote together. But I talked to somebody that I really trusted who was in the publishing field. She was an agent, and she said, nobody knows who you are. They're not going to read your memoir. You got to publish something else first. And so we did the other 3 books first, and we established ourselves in the field of facilitating workshops and being couples counselors. And then we took this one out of mothballs and we dusted it off and prettied it up. And it really is a pretty dark story about a rough patch that we went through where Charlie was a work addict and he was working 80 hours a week and traveling all over the place. And it just about broke us up. But we found a way to connect with each other during that dark time when we had to have a lot of separations, and we got through it. And when he finally did resign from that corporate position, the relationship began to flourish again and heal again. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of shadowy things in it, and it was cathartic to write it. And it was a real healing for us to go back in time, back into the 80s when we were going through it, and make more sense of it. And we offer it to the readers to see that when you hit a really dark place in your relationship, that is growth waiting to happen if you can utilize the experience. And if it doesn't really blow the relationship to smithereens, do you know that crash can be repaired and reassembled in a way that works better for you?
Well, especially in the current times with statistics, because I've interviewed along the way on radio and television a divorce mediator, and the numbers are 60% of all couples get divorced, and the second time they get married, they tend to divorce. The numbers are even higher, which you would think it would go the opposite, and that it would become lower, but it actually increases. So your message couldn't be more timely, and your willingness to be raw and to be out there and to share. And those are just like into our individual life. Some of the deepest, darkest places I have been in my life are definitely where the greatest gifts have come from. So just with that association, I can only imagine. Well, you've received a lot of powerful endorsements from Bernie Siegel and Stephen Levine, Gerald Jampolsky. I mean, he's Mr. Love Guy. Greg Lavoie. It's great just kind of visiting them with being on your website at bloodwork.com. What part of the story would you like to begin and share? Give us some good insight today.
Well, I know Linda described it as kind of a dark story. It's not exactly the way I see it. I see it as a very hopeful story, one about redemption. That you can really visit some very, very dark places in a committed partnership, as those of us who have ever spent any time in a committed partnership know. That there's always some degree of shadow in there. There are parts of ourselves that we're not particularly proud of, that under certain circumstances get expressed and revealed, and sometimes we're both in the same state of mind as the other person, and that can get difficult, to say the least. And we went through a transition in which we were both psychotherapists and living in New England, and I was offered a job on the West Coast that was very appealing to me, and we talked about it, and we moved. And that transition, which was a profound change for our whole family, turned out to have some very strong impacts on our life, both positive and negative. And the book is really about what we went through and what we learned from our experiences, and how we sank into some of these very dark places with each other. And I know that you had mentioned the title of the book is
That Which Doesn't Kill Us.
Yeah, well, that which doesn't
subtitle
kill us is the title, but
is the redeeming part.
Yeah, the subtitle is How One Couple Became Stronger. And so the book is really a book of hopefulness, and that's really what we've heard from a lot of people who have contacted us, that they see that, boy, what we went through is something that it's pretty amazing that we survived it, and our marriage survived it, but we learned so much from that experience. And Temple, the phrase that you used earlier was staying the course. We learned it from staying the course, from just hanging in there, sometimes just by our fingernails, just barely, but getting through it and learning. So what is there for me to learn in this moment, in this experience, in this very difficult, painful ordeal that I'm experiencing? What's the teaching? What's the lesson? And then doing our best to try to integrate those teachings into our relationship and into our life. And we truly did become stronger at the broken places, the places where the breakdowns occurred. We were able to learn how to deal with those, because breakdowns are going to occur even in the best relationships from time to time. We can't totally prevent them from happening, but what we can do is we can learn how to recognize them, find and recognize the teaching that's inherent in it, and then apply that, integrate that into our lives so that the breakdowns will occur with less frequency and we'll be able to put the corrections in more quickly. And so we'll spend much more time in a state of gratitude and appreciation and love, and much less time in a state of aggravation, conflict, and pain. So we give some very specific guidance to people who want to learn more about.
Okay, should I hang up, I assume?
Help us to learn those things.
Well, with one of the aspects of it, I was just curious as to, in your overview,
I'm going to hang up.
Were some of your findings, when you looked at the shadows and the conflict, was it needing to learn how to communicate? Was it that neither one of you as an individual knew how to individualize a journey of pain and the ups and downs and the flow of life? Were you like so many of us and you didn't have any modeling as to what relationship could be? Do any of those apply? I'm just being in the spirit intuitively, because I love talking to the two of you because it always flows just so fresh and raw. Was it any of those things?
It's all of those. Neither one of us had good models in our family. Charlie's parents didn't get along and they did divorce, and my parents didn't get along and they didn't divorce, but we didn't have a model of what a good, high-functioning, happy couple looked like. So we, like a lot of couples, came into this partnership with a big learning deficit. We did get good help, and there's nothing like a bona fide crisis to bring you down to your knees and going through the dark night of the soul, have you, reach down deep inside yourself. And we also got some good help from Stephen Levine and his wife and some other people too. And boy, did I learn a lot. And I learned so much about becoming more independent, because when Charlie was traveling, he was out of town. Sometimes he was out of the country. He wasn't even available by phone because he was working so much, and it forced me to make decisions that I would not have made on my own if he had been accessible to me. I learned so much about patience and tolerance and acceptance, way more than I thought that I ever was going to have to learn. And I learned a lot about forgiveness and letting go, forgiving myself for not being wife charming, and forgiveness of him for not being husband charming, and forgiveness of myself for not being mother charming because I was a stress case. And, I would have done a lot to be able to avoid the difficulty of that harsh time. But looking back on it now, I feel like it grew me like nothing else in my life has grown me. So I do have some appreciation many years later now, looking back on it, that going through it really matured me and grew me into a much better person.
Well, would you also feel, with your background and your both of your work that you've been doing all these years, that it seems to me, my feeling is that part of a dark night of the soul is almost like it's your ticket, like everyone is going to go through that for the most part one time. And for some people, depending on their soul evolution, well, they may go through more than one. But it's interesting that the beauty, to me, at least how I see it, is that you were able to bring this out together and go through it simultaneously, where the sense would be that often people will leave it, they'll leave a relationship, they'll pack, they'll cut their pictures in half to avoid having to go to such a place. Whereas it doesn't mean that they're going to avoid going through the dark night of the soul. It's still going to come. How do you feel about that?
I think you're right. it is going to come because we are creatures of habit, and many of our habits are designed to minimize pain and fear and distress in our lives. So we're really we're all looking for some stable place to land in which we can feel secure and not threatened. And that expectation and that hope runs directly into conflict with the reality that life is inherently about change. So we're left in this situation where we often choose a partner with whom we can get our desire for security and predictability and safety met, and it's inevitable that we are going to experience situations where we don't feel that. And so the question becomes, so what do I do? What do we do when we are met with circumstances that are preventing us from feeling what we want to feel? And all too often, the 60% of the divorces that you mentioned are activated because one of the things that so many of us do is we blame the other person for us not feeling the way we want to feel, for losing that security, for losing that feeling of unconditional trust, for losing the safety net that we thought we had. And when we get into cycles like that, we are going to have conflict. We're going to have difficulties. We're going to have differences that have to be resolved. And you'll notice that I said when we have when we get into those cycles. I didn't say if. We will. And it's just a matter of frequency and how long we get in there for, and how long it takes us to get out of it. So it's really about learning how to manage the inevitable challenges of life, and if we're all and of change, and if we have a grounding in something that no human being can give us the feeling of ongoing security that we crave, but if we have something in our lives, it could be a spiritual practice, it could be something other than something that we can rest in, that can provide us with more of that feeling, we can absorb some of the challenges of the inevitable ups and downs that we're going to go through in life, and not blame the other person or try to manipulate them into being the person that we want them to be at that time.
That's very powerful. Linda, it's your turn.
Yeah, I heard you use the phrase communication skills a little bit ago, and I will tell you that at the time we were going through this dark night of the soul, our communication skills were not the best. That we were, I'll speak for myself, I was blamey and reactive, and sometimes manipulative, and used guilt trips and all these unskillful means, because I was just such a stress case that I was kind of regressed. And I'll tell you that a lot of people are learning good communication skills, but when they're emotionally upset, they don't remember one thing they learned. And so I'll tell you that in addition to learning the good communication skills about making I statements and speaking from my vulnerable feelings of fear and insecurity and pain rather than the blamey stuff that was covering it up, I really had to grow up and mature and develop self-discipline to not let the angry things that I was feeling come flying out my mouth that made things much more difficult. That kind of self-restraint and the courage to be able to speak from my tender, vulnerable feelings. These were all really important growing opportunities that I would I would embrace and then I would lose, and then I would embrace and then I would lose. And so becoming more self-reliant into becoming a stronger, more mature individual was really what I needed to master during this time. What we've come to refer to the growth process as being is using our relationship as our spiritual practice. Because we all know people who can sit for hours, they can sit in meditation, and then where the rubber meets the road is when they really are in relationship with somebody else. Can we keep our dignity about us? Can we keep our center? Or are we going to be flung off of our seat and say and do things that are really not skillful choices? So it was a very growing time. So I invite people to look at how committed they are to using their relationship as a very central part of their spiritual practice. Because alongside, the meditation practice that's done silent as an individual, and the prayer that they're in, and the hymns that they sing, and the service that they do, their relationship as got a powerful potential to move them along the spiritual path, as it did for us.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. Yeah, for me, it was a number of years of just being able to language out loud how I was still carrying, not in a way of blaming at all, because I just have this feeling that, past 30, stop blaming your parents, but in the modeling that I did not get. As far as relationship, because I was like you, Linda, they ought to have divorced and they did not. So I had this space of what that was like. But there needed to be permission between me and my partner that we were able to language, oh, this is what this is showing up like. Oh, I'm reacting to this, and I'm seeing this appearance of default within you because it's triggering a concern that was how my mother used to be, and that's not really what I want, or I wouldn't want to be in that experience or whatever. And it's a beautiful richness of the willingness to grow out loud that way. But I do find, like the two of you are saying, both people have to be, willing parties. I mean, it's more than the conversation in your life winds up to be the conversation that you have in front of the mirror. You can walk away from the mirror, but your relationship, your love partner, is the mirror that you're kind of toting around everywhere you go. It's pretty fascinating. I found it to be just a rich experience. But for me, like you, the value has always been not only in staying, but getting deeper in, getting more involved, letting the heart be seen more and felt.
That is so true. I love what you're saying. It feels almost counterintuitive, because when we get into some of those states, some of those interactions, the very last thing that we want to do is to not go into it more deeply. We don't even want to get near it. We want to withdraw from it. That's the impulse. It's like when you touch a hot stove, you don't want to squeeze it tighter. You want to pull back from it. You want to retract your hand, and that's what it feels like. And it requires, a certain amount of real awareness and commitment and intentionality, and I'll use the word courage, to be willing to do what we need to do in order to move through, rather than to withdraw from the challenge that we've been given in this moment, to really explore it more deeply rather than to do what we feel inclined to do, which is to go into avoidance, denial, withdrawal, because that that doesn't work. And until we learn that doesn't work, we're kind of destined to continue these same patterns of manipulation, avoidance, and denial. So, these are some of the skills and strengths that we try to help people to develop within themselves so that they can respond in ways that will be healing and redemptive rather than in ways that are just going to deepen and perpetuate the problem.
It's a daily practice, isn't it?
It's an hourly practice. There's no shortage of opportunities to practice.
Oh boy, there you go. Yeah, you just really tuned into it. Yeah, it's an hourly practice, absolutely. And one of our greatest joys, isn't it, to understand relatability and the dynamic of family. Obviously, we have a lot more to talk about and to also discuss, and certain skills and things that you offer in your book with your telling your wonderful memoir and the stories that are woven into that. I want to remind everyone to go to bloomwork.com to discover Charlie and Linda and get involved in their work and know more about them, and also look at what value they have, because what you learned in relationship, even in intimate relationships, it transfers to all the relationships in your life. I want to thank all of you for participating. We'd love you to call in. We'd love to actually talk to you today and have more conversation with all of you. We'll be right back after this short break.
Thanks for joining us. This is Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world. It takes you to power Unity Online Radio. If you'd like to make a positive difference in the world, you can by contributing to this global ministry. Unity Online Radio relies on listeners like you to support our broadcasts that send our messages out to an awakening world. Go to unityonlineradio.org and click on Donate today.
Here's Reverend Paul Hasselbeck with a Unity Teachable Moment taken from a talk at Unity on the River in Amesbury, Massachusetts.
All good is defined as divine mind, God, and I love this, the principle of divine benevolence that permeates the universe. So God is not good like a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout. God is the good, the principle of benevolence. And benevolence is basically the disposition to do good or to treat others well and things like that. And so in that moment, when you're not wanting to offer grace to somebody, you can remember at the very point of view is this principle of benevolence. And as we remember that, we can draw on it, and then we use that principle to offer grace.
To find more from Reverend Paul Hasselbeck, visit the radio archives at unityonlineradio.org.
Join Travel with Unity 2020 for a transformational trip to Rome and the Amalfi Coast, March 26th to April 4th, and explore the culture, myths, and spiritual significance of southern Italy. You'll experience the history of the ancient ruins of Pompeii, visit the Vatican, and spend time on the beautiful Amalfi Coast during this 10-day tour. Just 40 seats are available and space is limited, so reserve your trip before September 15th. Go to unity.org/travel for more information today. Are you a spiritual explorer? Enrich your journey by engaging in inspiring and uplifting online courses starting now. Powered by Unity Worldwide Spiritual Institute's world-class online learning management system, you can join in live or study at your own pace in the comfort of your home. Check out courses in topics like mindfulness meditation, grief management, spiritual growth, and a lot more. Get help and support to achieve your dreams. Find out more by going to unity.org/spiritualexplorers today.
Recovery from addiction can be a lonely experience. Get help and support with Reverend Lonnie Vanderslice, Reverend Dan Beckett, and Spirit of Recovery every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Central. Welcome to a place where spirituality and recovery meet. Each week you'll hear stories and topics that are important to the recovery community. Tune in for some lively conversation and join in with your questions and comments. Nearly 21 million people struggle with addiction in America. Reach out and join us here on unityonlineradio.org.
Call now with your question or comment. 816-251-3555. That's 816-251-3555.
Welcome back to The Intentional Spirit with Reverend Temple Hayes.
And thank you for being with us. If you're just tuning in, go to bloomwork.com because we are talking to some experts with the relationship, Charlie and Linda Bloom. And why do I say that so boldly? Why are they experts? Because they have lived it and they have experienced it. It's not like they went to a couple of workshops and then decided that they wanted to compete with what the workshop was about. They actually have delved in and they have dedicated their lives to teaching people after 50 years of marriage and being forever young about it as well. So they have great gifts to offer us, tremendous value, and I love it when they're on the show. So Linda and Charlie, Linda, you wanted to continue talking about the bonding in relationships. So take the microphone and run, girl.
Well, I think it's really important for the listening audience, particularly for those who have all the competing urgencies going in their life with the two-career family and the raising the children. Sometimes the careers and the kids get all of the energy and the relationship gets the leftovers, the scraps. And no wonder the relationship's not thriving. It's trying to get by on starvation rations. And one of the things that we learned when we were going through this dark time is to put everything aside. And we had small little pockets of time when Charlie would be back from his work, because he traveled all over the country when he was working for the corporation. And we learned how to make every minute count. And we'd get the kids off to school in the morning, and we'd get back in bed with each other, and we would have deep and meaningful talks. And we would connect and caress and share, and we wouldn't answer the phone, and we wouldn't get up and go to the gym or do all the things that we wanted to do. We made our connection with each other the most high priority in our life. And I'll tell you, if we didn't put that bubble around our relationship and protect it from all the other things that were competing for our attention, we never would have made it through that dark time. So I'm grateful to Charlie that he was willing to show up for it, because there was a time when our relationship was just hanging by threads. And without that, that one day that we could connect to each other would allow me to make it one more week. And then we would have a day where we could take some hours to catch up with each other, and then we could make it one more week. And I learned how to put down all of my irritation and resentment and what wasn't working for me, and my perfectionism about what I thought the marriage had to look like, and just consciously put it on the shelf for a while until we could see in each other why we got together in the beginning and why we had these 3 kids together with each other. We could see the beauty in each other that was there. It was right alongside the part that wasn't working.
Well, and especially now, because you really made a commitment that you close the other world off, so you could continue to develop knowing each other in friendship and marriage and all those kind of things. And now it's such a different space that we live in. And in innocence, we still call the thing we carry a phone. It's not a phone. We call it a phone, but it's a computer, it's a camera, it's a scrapbook. It's our social media. It's our notifications. It's all of those things. And how is that changing for people with the couples that you work with and the experiences that you have and the things that you hear while you're out in the field?
It's changing in ways that most people cannot even conceive of. And I'm not anti-technology by any means. And I have a lot of gratitude for my laptop and for my phone and for the ease with which I'm able to communicate information to people and to receive it. Having said that, I have a lot of concern and worry about the way in which it's affecting particularly the younger people who have never known a world that doesn't have these conveniences and who relate to them not as enhancements of life but as requirements of life, and who confuse online connection or connection through the internet or through various forms of email or voicemail with communication. The word communication really has the same root as the word common, and it means to share experiences together and to create understanding mutually with each other. And although technology can do wonders in terms of conveying information, it's not so good at creating connection and understanding. And for that, we need to have more direct forms of communication. And I really have a lot of concerns about people who have had so little experience having truly direct, meaningful connection in their communication with their ability to create meaningful relationships, because as we all know, that relationships require good communication, mutual understanding, support, reciprocity. These are the things that create the foundation for good relationships. And when we don't have that, we're really at risk of being on very shaky ground in terms of being able to create successful relationships. So a lot of the work that we do is trying to repair the deficit that people have because they don't have much, if any, genuine, meaningful contact with other people.
Well, Linda, we were talking during break about some new kind of shocking statistics. That when it comes to intimacy, people are still having a difficult time hiding their phone computer from themselves.
I think that it's not a good idea to take your laptop into the bedroom with you or to take your phone in there, and some people have to have them nearby all the time. And when I ever read that piece of research about the 17 to 35-year-olds that were asked, how many of you have either sent or received a text during sex, that 20% of the people said yes, that they had. And I thought, gosh. Oh my goodness, is there nothing that's sacred? And I think that people really need to take a look at, are the screens enhancing my life, or are they starting to rob from the way in which I'm relating face to face, looking in the eye, touch to touch, because they can be so distracting. And if we've learned anything from our own relationship and what works here, and from the many couples that we've worked with over the years, and we did a whole study about the blue ribbon relationships, the gold medalists of marriage, and they make their relationship a really high priority. And so I just know for sure that those couples who are enjoying the best that relationship can be, making it to co-creative state, that these people have blackout periods where their screens are completely off limits.
Because if there's an unwillingness or lack of practice in doing so, you start to have a screen between the two of you.
That's right. It can be divisive. People can be relating to their screens instead of each other because it's risky to be vulnerable with your partner and to speak about your deeper feelings and speak about your needs and what works for you in the relationship and what doesn't and how you want to be loved and if they're missing the mark a little bit. These kinds of conversations can be really high risk. And so sometimes people use their screens to avoid that deeper, you were talking about going deeper into the relationship. We're always encouraging people to be the deep divers and tell themselves the truth first and then reveal it rather than conceal it with their partner.
Now, what do you think lies ahead for the two of you?
Well, good question. I guess my short answer to that question was I just had a birthday, and I acknowledged to myself and to Linda and to anybody who would listen that it just seems to keep getting better, which is not what I had expected. I figured that at this point in my life, I would be winding down, not just in terms of work, but, just winding down. You get older, you don't have as much energy, your passion is diminished, things just kind of slow down and wind down. And, it's been the opposite for me. It's not busier necessarily, but my level of engagement with life keeps getting stronger and more fulfilling. And at the same time, easier and more peaceful. So it's like the best of both worlds. And I'm not sure how that works or why that works, but I'm just living in a lot of gratitude that it does work that way, for me anyway. And I attribute a lot of that to the quality of my relationships, not just with Linda, but with other people in my life. That, this business of learning how to create great relationships is something that affects every single dimension of our lives, including our physical health, our sense of well-being, our capacity to enjoy pleasure. I mean, it is, as far as I'm concerned, it's the hub of the wheel. It's the center from which everything else emanates. So my answer to that question is what I expect is just going to keep getting better. At some point, it's going to stop getting better. At some point, it's going to stop. But in the meantime, so far, so good.
Well, it's not surprising you're a trailblazer in that as well, because people that don't live inside the box tend to do that with everything. Relationships can be successful and happy and filled with 50 and 60 and 70 years as you're doing, and you can be an ageless spirit and not buy into all the ideas that people tell us all the time about the number and what's going to happen and what's supposed to happen and all of that. So it's not surprising at all. What about you, Linda? What lies ahead for the two of you and for you?
I'm enjoying the journey and feeling really optimistic about what lies ahead. I know that a lot of people in our age group, now that we're in the 70s, they're retiring. Some of them have been retired for years. And Charlie and I don't really want to retire because neither one of us can figure out what would be better than what we're doing, because we're blessed to be able to be in service. We are changing the proportion of how much we're working and how much we're playing, and the line is getting very thin between work and play. So we're traveling more, and when we do our international trips, we often take people from the network with us. This fall, we're going to Asia, and we've got a group for 20 days that's going with us there. I think we'll continue to teach at some of the centers at Esalen and Multiversity and Kripalu, and I still have fire in the belly to write some more books. And I think that I got at least a couple more, maybe even more than that in me. And we're having a ball with our grandkids. We have 3 grandsons, and we're really enjoying them. And we go off on vacations with the 3 generations together. We do a summer one and a winter one. And I feel like we're reaping the benefits of all the good work that we've done, a lot of which has been using our relationship as a spiritual practice, because I feel like we're kind of in a golden age now, do you know, and that it's harvest time. And so I really want to appeal to your listening audience that there's sometimes in the 20s and 30s and midlife, there are difficulties that have to be fielded, but if we do our own work, we can expect to be rewarded with some wonderful things. The careers that flourish, seeing our kids and grandkids growing up and doing well in their lives, and particularly relishing and savoring the sweetness that our relationship can become.
That's extremely powerful. So let's go back to the book, That Which Doesn't Kill Us, and the story of the 2 trailblazers when it comes to infinite love. Is there anything that the 2 of you have learned for sure? When you think about that person that's listening, that one nugget, and obviously it's to simplify a whole process of all your learnings, but is there something that sticks in your mind that's like, wow, you're glad that you had that as you were moving towards your life?
Well, the thing that comes up for me, Temple, in response to that question is the point that really, I think, has been one of my very biggest teachings is something that appeared in our first book, 101 Things That I Wish I Knew When I Got Married. And it's actually, we have, a list of the 101 things, and then we have some comments and commentary and vignettes that kind of represent some stories that represent the theme. So the second of the 101 things is vulnerability is disarming. And that little vignette has to do with the power that vulnerability has, emotional vulnerability has in a relationship where we think that vulnerability is something scary, something that is a weakness, and I don't want to show it, because if I do show it, I'll be at risk of getting hurt or getting attacked, or somebody might exploit that as a weakness, or they might take advantage of me. And what I've learned over the years is that vulnerability is a strength. It's not a weakness. It's not something to be afraid of or ashamed of. Particularly, as a man, the conditioning that we men have in this culture is that we don't want to show vulnerability. Vulnerability is weakness. That's dangerous. That makes us appear to be at risk of being hurt or attacked. And what I've learned is it's the opposite, that my vulnerability is actually what makes me safer. Because when I'm willing to be vulnerable, guess what? The person with whom I am relating at the time also is going to feel safer. And when they feel safer, they're going to feel less defensive. And when they feel less defensive, they're going to feel less inclined to be on the attack. They're going to be more open. They're going to actually become more vulnerable out of my vulnerability. So instead of trying to be tough and hard and defensive and invulnerable, that if I can override that impulse, which is pretty strong, in me, and I think in most men, and in women too, to some degree, but I think to a lesser degree. But the willingness to do that, I have found it's almost like a sanctuary. I feel safer in my vulnerability. So to me, that's the biggest teaching that I think I've taken away from this work.
I love that, and it kind of dissipates any kind of energy of reactiveness or the drama side of communication. And with that, of what you're saying, I want to reiterate to people, maybe for you listening, 50 years seems like a long time for now. However, Charlie and Linda have done many books, and they make, great wedding presents, or they're great to give your family. An End to Arguing is one of those, Your Guide to Great Sex. The 10 biggest things we've learned since we got married. I mean, all of those things are, I remember still to this day as a teenager, I had a poster in my room that said, learn from the mistakes of others, for perhaps you won't live long enough to learn them all yourself. And that's stayed with me. Isn't that powerful? It's just, it's just stayed with me all my life, because it's so true. People like you that are willing to share out loud and share your vulnerabilities, as Charlie said, and part of your path and those kind of things. You only help everybody else in what we don't need to do, or what we can avoid, or what we can learn from, or how we can be more engaged and more involved, or whatever that might be. It's a beautiful thing. I thank the two of you for your willingness to live out loud. It's very powerful.
You're very welcome.
So, Linda, we got to have you talking.
Yes,
what do you think about all this?
Charlie was talking about living with an open heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's bang on. That's right where it is. And my life goal for decades now has to be becoming and evolving into the most loving, contributing person that I can possibly be. And for me, that's clear, that the secret of life is becoming a more loving person. And so everything that our relationship with our beloved, if we happen to have a spouse or a lover, with our kids, with our family members, with our closest friends, with our neighbors, with the people that we work with, relationship is going to flush up many opportunities for us to learn and to grow and to use it all. Because from my point of view, what is a better use of our time than becoming a more self-actualized, loving, contributing person? I think that's really hitting the jackpot. And if you have somebody who's willing to work with you towards that goal, man, that's just amplifies everything, because then you have a good agreement in place. It's a good deal that you make, that you're going to work with removing any obstacles that are in your way. If you're carrying old stuff from the past that's making you heavy so that you can't dance through life, that you heal those with the help of your closest people in your life. And if you have fears and worries and anticipating the future, that you have somebody in your life that helps you let go and turn that over and surrender and live in the now, be present now where life is going on. So I'm all about that. And I have a tremendous amount of gratitude for having come to this point, and I hope that I will keep on growing and offering, channeling through to everybody, that sees us for Skype sessions and counseling sessions, and come to be in our classes as students, or in any way that we can touch and inspire them with our Facebook Lives. And the fact that I get to do it with my honey just fills me with joy. I feel so blessed to be able to do this work with him because it amplifies the fun factor.
No, you still sound like a kid in high school. What are we going to do? How is the book doing? Are you happy with how it's progressing?
This one is kind of a specialized market, and so it hasn't had the kind of acclaim that the basic primer, 101 Things I Wish I Knew When I Got Married, had. There have to be people who want to be the deep divers, who are willing to face into the shadow. So the market's not as large for this one. And, we're involved in writing another book right now, and we hope to finish it in the next few months. And this is 101 Things that I wish I knew about arguing when I got married. And so I'm really, I feel like people need to face into, there's some gnarly things that we have to struggle with to be eligible for a great relationship, to know how to fight well, to negotiate for our needs, to make the descent into the dark. And I know that a lot of people don't have that kind of ambition. If they could just get an okay relationship, that they would be so happy. But I'm trying to encourage people to go for the gold, for the greatest that it can be.
Oh, well, I have no doubt with your passion, both of you, that there's so much more that we're going to hear and learn from you through the years. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I just always look forward to having you, and because you just talking to you, I want to be better, and I want to do better at sharing love and keeping my heart open. I want to thank you so much for your willingness to be who you are. And for everyone, go to bloomwork.com, bloomwork.com, and we'll have to have you on the show.
Thank you for listening to Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.